future doesn't always have to look futuristic. Sometimes it can look like a surface parking lot. 25 miles from Boston, in Framingham, Massachusetts, the site was just another surface parking lot that we all drove by every day. We transformed it with an incredibly modest building that was designed to test the future of air travel. A place where you can check in, drop your bags, clear TSA security along with your bags, and be dropped off after you board a bus right at your gate on airside. Massport's remote terminal, a pilot that we're testing for Logan Airport, challenges the assumptions of what an airport can be. It challenges where you can put an airport on a surface parking lot that most of us would just drive by without giving it a second glance. And 250 years goes by in this country, I'd like to ask a different question. While it's tempting to talk about what we're going to build next, I'd like to ask it in a way, what is the future already hiding that we already have? The future can start when we start to rethink what that boundary is. For the remote terminal, we inherit a number of assumptions about what a building is, where that should be located, and what program goes into it. An airport and all of its functions doesn't always need to be located right next to the runway. We can rethink the boundary of the airport, we can expand it. We can think of the airport more as a distributed system, one where the pieces of the airport could exist closer to where people live. Think about an airport, all the garages that exist, all of those surface parking lots that exist. What if we could design the next airport to be more of a micro airport? The rooftop already is designed with the loads in it on the roof to support eVTOL, to basically allow for short flights to the Cape, to New York, while our international airports handle the long-haul flights. This is expanding the boundary of what's possible, as well as getting that experience closer to where people live. Another way to rethink the boundary is through the building skin itself. For one of our affordable housing projects in Mattapan that's currently under construction, we designed the facade so it doesn't just look good and it doesn't just repel water, although it does that too. We integrated photovoltaics in the building skin so it generates power for the building. The wall doesn't just become a boundary, it becomes a power plant. I'd also like to challenge us because I think the future feels more human when we can embed memory in it. In Beacon, New York, we took a Civil War era mansion that had been transformed early on, early 1900s, into a sanitarium. Patients that basically were housed there included Zelda Fitzgerald, Rosemary Kennedy. Jackie Gleason liked the place so much, he gifted it his pool table just so he could have a place to play when he stayed there. A number of years later, with 2 brutalist additions added on, the place had quadrupled in size. It turned into a psychiatric hospital. By the time we got it, it had been vacant for 25 years. And it's challenging to inherit buildings with this type of history behind it. There were so many holes in the roof, we didn't think we'd get through the permitting process without the building basically falling in. In the outgrown and overgrown landscape, we found this weeping hemlock, a tree that is so rare, there's only one that exists, and it's in the Arnold Arboretum. On the inside, even more spectacularly, there was an addition that was put on right after the mansion was built by Richard Morris Hunt, an incredible pipe organ. It had a bay window that had been blown out on 2 sides when they built the hospital to basically turn it into a corridor. We restored the bay window, we restored the organ, and we basically marched backward in history to go forward into the future. And I think it's places like these that you can't build something new that still has the story in the walls. You know, we can make something efficient, we can make it beautiful, but people are drawn to these places where there's history, there's stories that are still existing in those walls. And finally, having the old and new stand together and making the future visible through that side. There's a place in downtown Boston, right at the tip of Post Office Square. It's comprised of basically an entire block, 7 old bank buildings, an old alley. We uncovered a map. That map had that alley named as Congress Square. And we were challenged once we got the building of what to do with it. The office no longer had its relevance and the same relevance. It had been stitched together with a number of cut-up floors. And so we basically kept the historic base. We reconnected the lobby to the street, challenged what a bank building was, created these shortcuts through the actual buildings and in the block, and then designed a building to appear that it's floating on top. The underside of the soffit has this rippling color. It reflects light down into the sidewalk. It actually makes people stop and look up. Our office is right across the street. And I think it tells us that cities don't have to choose between memory and momentum, preservation and ambition. The best cities really let both exist together. And I think 250 years into this country, that's the same question we need to ask ourselves. What are those places that already exist? How do we find the future that is hidden in the spaces that we already have? And how do we look again? Thank you.